Hello, listeners. Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a moment to tell you about another show on our podcast network that I co-host called Higher Ed Pulse. Higher Ed Pulse is your weekly spotlight on the latest in higher education marketing and enrollment. From headline news to social posts, insider insights to industry observations, join yours truly and Seth Odell as we share top stories from across the world of higher education. Each bite-sized 15-minute episode is packed with personality and designed to bring what's top of mind to the top of your feed. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Higher Ed Pulse wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Breaking Silos, a podcast that shines a light on the incredible partnerships happening across campuses every day. I'm your host, Shane Baglini from Muhlenberg College. Join me every 2 weeks for discussions with some of the best minds in higher ed marketing, enrollment management, student affairs, campus leadership, and more. Breaking Silos is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Welcome to episode 8 of Breaking Silos, where I'm joined by two guests from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. I'm joined by Nate Jorgensen, Senior Director of Marketing, and Dr. Joyce Fernandes, Professor of Biology and Director of Undergraduate Research at Miami. Nate and Joyce, welcome, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
So we're here to talk about a partnership between undergraduate research and marketing at Miami University. And so, Joyce, I'll start with you to kind of give us the sort of overview of undergraduate research at Miami, what makes it distinct, and talk about how students are benefiting from it.
Sure thing. Undergraduate research at Miami has been happening long before I came to this university, I've been here about 25 years, and we just celebrated our 30th undergraduate research forum, and research has been going on for even longer than that. So it has been a part of the tradition, the academic environment at Miami University. And this past year, we had about 2,000 students doing one-on-one undergraduate research. That is not even counting the number of students that are engaged in research-based courses where the number jumps to 4 times as many. So it is woven into the academic fabric here. The benefits of undergraduate research are several. Number one, transferable skills. Students are thinking outside of what they learn within the course, the 4 walls of the classroom, and they are learning it in contexts where they can apply the knowledge that they already have. NACE, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, has identified 8 of those competencies that employers are looking for that are all met by undergraduate research. And some of those are working in a team, leadership skills, creative thinking, critical thinking. So there are a lot of benefits to undergraduate research. It's about defining a problem, designing the approach to it, going with it, executing it, and then analyzing the data you get. And we do this in our daily lives, no matter what situation.
And you mentioned the number of students participating in undergraduate research. Can you give us a little context that, just for those listening, the size of the institution overall and kind of what percentage that is of undergraduate students?
Sure. So we have about 18,000 total students here, undergraduate students. And so a good proportion are doing undergraduate research here. As I said, if you just look at 2,000 students doing one-on-one research, mentored research, that's a small proportion. But we have about 8,000 per year that are doing it, which is a good chunk of the 18,000 students on campus.
That's great. And you know, in our conversation, we were talking about the need to sort of communicate all of this great research and impact and outcomes. And so, Nate, that's where you come in. So from your perspective, what kind of led to or sparked the need for marketing to partner with undergraduate research to sort of communicate all of these great things?
I was just looking back at my calendar before this interview to see exactly when it happened. And it's kind of funny that it happened within, I believe, my first 3 weeks on the job, because I started on February 1st, 2022, and we had a meeting on the 22nd of that month to talk about this event and this work. And I remember in that meeting that I just said, I want to be a part of this. I don't know how much we're going to be able to rope everybody into doing something with it, but I'm just a science nerd. I helped start a science festival in one of the towns that I lived in a couple years ago. And I've always just been a Carl Sagan fan. So whenever something is happening, and if it's happening with undergraduate students, it might be a little bit more accessible to me as a marketer. And so I just got super excited about it and saw this as a differentiator for us. There are so many big schools in our area that we compete with that have amazing R1 research capabilities. I'm going to bet that they don't have the amount of undergraduate opportunities that Miami does. And that's a real differentiator. And that's something that I want to explain to prospective students what exactly that means, because there's a lot of words in there that a prospective undergrad might not know, but it was so exciting. And I was just like, after the first meeting, I was like, I'm in for everything.
I love that. It's easy to communicate and market about something that you're passionate about. And so that's really cool to hear. But, it can be complex and challenging to effectively sort of make these complex topics accessible. So can you talk about some of the strategies you've implemented to do that and engage with broader audiences?
Yes, absolutely. So last year, and we used them this year too, we made some research posters to display out front at the Undergraduate Research Forum, which is the main event for undergraduate research. And it took a few of the undergraduate research projects and put them in a bit of a visual form and showed the experiment and the outcomes just a little bit more in plain English to really show people that this can be accessible to people. It's very hard work. It's very hard to learn how to do it. But if you're talking about a self-powered bicycle and the amount of exercise that you get from it, or deer herds and their effect on tree growth in the area, it can be broken down in a way that people understand it. And that's where I think, Shane, like you'll recognize, that's that little like bridge that like clicks in your mind. You're like, ooh, there's a hook right there that I can tell. And so we started kind of, I would almost say, messing around with some stories. Here's a feature story about an undergraduate researcher and what she found in her research on the eyes of fish in one instance. And then we started working them more and more into some of our other communication and marketing channels, like our podcast that helps prospective undergraduate students decide on a major. And we had some students who were involved in undergraduate research be featured on that. And we really focused on moving it out of the hard sciences as well. That was something that Joyce was doing anyway, but to really show that really interesting research can be done outside of beakers and microscopes. And those are all amazing things that should be done. But we had someone researching ghost stories, the ghost stories of a haunted prison, the Shawshank Prison, believe it or not. And that was one. I read that like word for word as a Shawshank fan. And someone who researched, a long forgotten writer from Nazi Germany who was killed and their work was lost. And she presented the person's work and she's like, this work needs to be back out there. And everybody listening in the place last year was like, you're right. Like that work needs to be talked about. So those were just kind of some of the magic things that I think happened from it previously that are real exciting and make it something that really clicks with both undergraduate research and marketing.
Yeah, that's great. I would love to read the ghost story.
I'll send it to you. We'll link it in the notes.
And just to follow up to that for you, Joyce, talk about the freedom that students have to kind of self-select, if that's applicable, the research that they're interested in.
So there are different ways in which students are coming into the research. Some of them have an idea that they want to be part of a certain lab. Now I'm talking about those in STEM. But then on the other hand, students may have taken a class with a professor in art history and were intrigued by a class project and they wanted to follow up. And so they then go and talk to the professor. So really, I would think that if a student is interested in pursuing a certain area of work, that is possible to do here. So some students will come in knowing that they want to do research. Others encounter it along the way. And so they may encounter it as a result of classes, or they might encounter it through a program we have that's called FIRE, First Year Research Experience, FIRE with a Y, we call it. Are you on fire? So yes, students have different ways of getting into it. They can either have a sense for what they want to do, or they get it along the way. And I think that is one of the most beautiful parts I love about this campus and the efforts that our faculty put into their teaching is that they will incorporate research into their courses as well. So it broadens the opportunities that students have to engage themselves and to experience that research. And I just want to make a quick comment about the ghost story that Nate was talking about. We had just piloted that year this series of workshops where students were, learning about, talking about their research to folks from different disciplines to start with. And that story was one of them. And it was a student from our College of Arts and Sciences. And I already was in contact with our communications person in the college. And actually, it was him who got me connected with the UCM team, because I said to him, look, there is something more here and we need more people on this to really spread the message. So that's how it got started. The ghost story was one of the first stories that we put out there.
That's great. So season 2 of Breaking Silos, we're going to do a ghost story episode. But so I'll start with you on this one, Joyce. How have the marketing efforts for undergraduate research in your eyes impacted both the visibility and appreciation of the programs on campus? Because it sounds like it's really ingrained in the fabric of Miami University. So I'm wondering, sort of, has it elevated sort of the visibility and the appreciation for folks around campus?
So as Nate said, it's just been 2 years. So I think we're still in fledgling mode here. Although it has been, undergraduate research has been woven in the fabric for a really long time. Students know if they want to do undergraduate research, they can come and talk to faculty members. But then the thing is, how do you take it outside the walls of those rooms and spaces in which those discussions are going on and that work is going on? And that is where I think this partnership with UCM has been so fabulous. It's just about 2 years old that we are now starting to continually look at it again, address it, retool it. And so I think on campus, the big visibility that has happened, which Nate pointed out to, is last year for the first time at the Undergraduate Research Forum, when we had these posters in the foyer of that big hall in which we have 100 posters at a time, 3 times a day. The entryway was lined with these posters representing student projects from across all the colleges, and we had 6 of them. 6 colleges and about 9 posters, I think. So that was a visible moment, a visible day. And people coming in and out were, looking at it. Those that were featured there were so thrilled to see that. And they wanted pictures of those, So that is one measure that I have to say that this was visible. And I think we still have a long way to go. And my goal is, as Nate again pointed out, how do we raise the visibility across disciplines as well? People in the discipline know what they're doing within the hallowed walls of the department, the building. But how do we take it outside? How do we showcase it outside so that the community here, the university community, knows about it, and then beyond? The beyond part, I leave it to Nate, because that's what their team does best.
Okay, so then let's get to the beyond part, Nate. What have you seen the results so far in this 2-year endeavor? And actually, I'm interested in how you're measuring success and results.
Yeah, one, not extremely well, I'll say, first of all. There's a lot of just like trying and throwing some new stuff out there. One example I'll give, though, is one of the students who had done humanities research had then done a podcast episode about their research. And then we featured that student in a recruitment email to prospective students in that major. So it was kind of a couple different things hitting these prospective students at once. And one thing that we've noticed, and it was the case with this email as well, is that those recruiting emails to a particular major or area of majors that feature a student who's really finishing up with flying colors and really enjoyed that program, telling their story, telling who they are, telling the challenges that they overcame to get there, and having those shown to prospective students, we've really seen a high rate of engagement on those emails. So that has really gotten us pointed in a direction of more specific emails for prospective students. And I really like doing that. I really think it's helpful for students to see what's happening in the exact area that they're interested in, and not just always seeing the engineering student or the business student as might kind of happen by default. So we're really in the beginning stages of some of those. We're really trying a lot of different things still. And I know for one, like I wasn't able, and it just kind of came up on us by surprise, on me this year by surprise at least. Like I wasn't able to be as involved this year as I was last year, and I hated that. I kind of noticed like the week of when I was like, oh, like I hadn't really been as involved as I had in the past. And I had started this new position that I'm in now. Instead of academic marketing, I'm just in general marketing. So that was a transition that I would have been trying to catch up with and trying to learn what I'm doing. And that kind of caused that. But being able to attend some of the forum this year, I really got a glimpse into it and was really just like, oh, I need to get back into this. I need to make sure to find space for this over the course of a year from now on.
Yeah, and it's your passion project, so that makes a lot of sense.
Hey, it's Mallory. Exciting news! I'm hosting the Engage Summit in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Together, we'll dive into the mind of the modern student, what fires them up, how they interact, and what they expect in today's digital age, and how tools like AI help put them in the driver's seat of their education. We have some terrific speakers, including our closing keynote, New York Times best-selling author Jeff Selingo. Sessions will dig into practical ideas and innovative strategies to get your team more student-centered and ready to adopt AI. And many of your favorite Enrollify hosts are presenting too, like Jamie Hunt, Jenny Lee Fowler, and Brian Gross. Use the discount code Enrollify50 for an extra $50 off your registration. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there.
Joyce, during our pre-interview, you talked about a workshop for students to teach them how to talk about their research, communicate their research, and sort of pitch their research. So I'd be interested if you could expand on that process and what that event looks like, and just talk about some of the skills that students gain from those experiences.
So we have a program that we call the Undergraduate Summer Scholars Program, and we have anywhere from 70 to 100 students that attend this over the summer. And so in the past, what has happened is that, students get these awards, they go into their departments and groups and rooms, and they do their work. And so a couple of years ago, we decided, why don't we bring these folks together, see who each other is, learn about what they are doing in the hopes of creating some sort of a community, in the hopes of getting these students talking to one another about their projects. And I remember the very first one, we had titles put on the wall. And I love doing this one session that I call What's in a Title? It's got to tell the story. It's got to catch your attention. And so here was a math person trying to tell the anthropologist what their title meant. And that was just amazing. And so that was the beginning of launching into a very more formal 3 to 4 part series where we broke it down. We talk about session 1, what are the considerations? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Who should care? What's next? How did you get started with this? And so that is what they learn in the first workshop. And really, I have to give credit to our partners across, not only UCM, we had folks from government relations, alumni engagement, admissions coming together to say, career services coming together to say, here is our little, input into how you might design this. And so students learn about those. And then we kind of do the rest of the sessions geared towards, okay, if you were to pitch this to a high school student, how would you do it? If you were to pitch it to an alumni, how would you do it? A donor, legislator. And so we go through all of those in subsequent workshops, and we give students homework. And this homework, again, was designed with input from folks who helped craft the workshops. And so students are getting practice in, first awareness. Number 2, they learn to put down in writing what they're doing, make it effective. And number 3, then we followed it up last fall, actually, for the first time with a showcase. Now that you've learned all of this, let's hear you. Let's hear your 2-minute spiel. So I think, what students, in terms of the skills that students are learning, number 1 is awareness. Awareness not to be a nerd. It is good to be a nerd, but when you're in public talking with folks, you want to break down the barriers of your nerdiness. And so how do you get the point across? They do that. They get some skills in writing, making that sales pitch in writing, and then doing it orally.
That's great. That's great. And Nate, is UCM involved in this in any way, kind of helping craft that messaging?
Yeah, actually, that's one of the things that I've been very involved in and have stayed very involved in is I don't know if you would say I help teach that, but I'm working in it. Joyce, you can tell me maybe I'm a guest lecturer at times.
He's a facilitator.
Facilitator, thank you. And so one of the things I've done over and over again is Joyce and I think me both are probably sick of watching it, but the clip from Don't Look Up when Leonardo DiCaprio is trying to explain to President Meryl Streep that there's an asteroid coming toward Earth and it's going to end all life on Earth, but he starts talking about the Oort cloud and he starts talking about Gaussian's method of something. And so just shows like the worst possible example at the worst possible time of using scientific language when what you really need to say is an asteroid's coming, it's going to hit in 10 days, the Earth is going to be gone unless we do something about it. And so we've shown that over and over again. And I think that's at least opens the door to students thinking about it and maybe other people thinking about it that way too, that you can. And if you look at COVID, there's some really good examples of that where some people have used that kind of storytelling to talk about how if someone doesn't follow the scientifically found ways to stop the spread, what can happen and how that affects a family, instead of just going on and on about molecules and cells and spread rates and everything like that, where, you can always just feel that at least some parts of your audience kind of tuning out at a certain point. I take that stuff seriously. I'll fight for what I think is the best way to say it. And I know like last year, there was a student that I worked with that we went probably 5 rounds back and forth and her saying, this is as simple as it can get. And me just saying, this is not good enough. I don't understand it. And maybe she was right. Maybe it's like the Higgs boson particle that I'm just never going to understand it. But I will push students to really try to say it in a way that their uncle can understand it, which is usually the way that I put it.
Yeah, I really like that example you gave of the movie and teaching students how to make these really complex topics approachable. And part of that is right. It's communicating to the average audience and sort of broadening that appeal. And then, so Nate, from your perspective and your, kind of what you're charged with, you mentioned integrating visits from high achieving students into some of these research activities and really strategically thinking about that. So how, if at all, has that approach helped enrollment and student engagement among those groups?
I would say we haven't tied that together very well yet, and that's on me mostly. But we have had some transition in our leadership in enrollment where, that was kind of one of the things that just fell by the wayside a little bit. I know that we kind of informally tried to have a group of undergraduate students come through the forum who just happened to be on their visit that day. But our ultimate goal, and probably something that I should just kind of get better in writing and on people's radar early, is to try to have the day of the Undergraduate Research Forum be a day for high achieving prospective students to come through, because those are typically the students who are going to be attracted to that and then end up benefiting from it too. Other students will too, and can too, from any starting place. But I would just see that very much as a starting point, because it's super impressive to see when it's happening. There are students giving 10-minute presentations. They're giving lightning presentations. They're giving poster talks. And if you go through the hall and you ask them questions, I just couldn't imagine being that smart at that age. And so just that blows me away. And I learn a bunch of stuff every time. And I would just love to have those students who are interested in research perhaps, but I think any kind of high achieving prospective student would probably see some things in there that they would think, oh, this place really does this well, and maybe I would like to be a part of it.
Yeah, I'm always amazed when I talk to college students about. I always think to myself, I was not like this at 18. I'm not like this at 36 years old. To be frank,
not even close.
I'm always impressed when I talk to students. But you mentioned something interesting there, Nate, and being able to start from sort of any background, or not necessarily having to be a high achiever. So what are some of the ways that you've communicated that to your general student population, and kind of sticking with that, making it a little bit more approachable and accessible?
Yeah, that was a great thing that happened last year. And I think it was a bit because of what my role was at the time. When I first came to Miami in early 2022, I came as the senior director of academic marketing, which was really, I was charged with centralizing the work of the colleges. And that's as hard as it sounds to anyone out there who is working in academic marketing and communication. But this was one of those opportunities that came up where this was just a great opportunity. We mentioned the College of Arts and Science, that they had always been a huge part of this and still are, maybe in the 90% sometimes of the number of their research that is shown there, just because that's what it is. It's chemistry, biology, and everything like that. And because of my role and because of Joyce's idea and kind of her permission to do it, like, let's spread it out all over and try to get as many as possible. And we had some just really interesting examples. I told about, researching the writer. And then also there was a group from the business school who researched the effects of weather and artificial turf on an NFL organization's investment on their players, and whether the risk for injury goes up or down in that time, and how that affects the economics of that. I don't think a paper like a research project like that would have thought to include itself 2-3 years ago. And now that was almost like the star of the show that year. And really, when you have your poster is the picture of a football player making a cut on artificial turf, that gets people's attention right away, who maybe aren't immediately drawn to the more microscopic research that's happening, and can really just be a gateway, I guess. And at that year, and I believe we did it again this year, every college participated. So that includes music, that includes all of the creative arts, that includes engineering, who has a big event of their own. And that's something that we're trying to kind of sync up and not have those be so much of separate events. So kind of every college has its own challenge, whether it's either not doing this before or very much doing this before and having their own way of doing it. And I hope that I kind of served and can can continue to serve as a conduit to bring those people into the overall what the university is doing with this.
I love that. Yeah, I love that the university has made, really, it seems like a concerted effort to make this particular area accessible and approachable to all. And I really appreciate that. So I want to ask you both about lessons that you've learned from this partnership and collaborating together, and any challenges that you've had to overcome together. And Nate, I'll get your thoughts first.
Yeah, mine are pretty simple. It's just how incredibly hard it is. It is really hard to communicate research. And there's a reason why there is only one Carl Sagan and there's only one Neil deGrasse Tyson. And it's because it is really hard to have the knowledge in order to not speak out of turn about what you're saying. But if I just think of the example of, in the first Cosmos on PBS, when Carl Sagan explained how thousands of years ago, I believe, someone found out the circumference of the Earth by measuring the shadows of two posts in two different places at high noon on the summer solstice. And from the length of those shadows, that person 1,000 years ago inferred this is the circumference of the Earth. And he said whatever the number was, and I don't remember it. And he was just like, that's correct. That's correct to within 0.1%. And that was from someone looking at two posts 20 miles apart and deciding that it's one round and that it's two. This is what the circumference is. And so I always just have that dream in the back of my mind of having that moment of when I or someone that I help can have that type of helpful narrative to inspire someone to do the same thing. That's always something that's a challenge. And like I said, with the student, I think the student at the end that I went back and forth with was just like, no, you're wrong. There's no way this can get simpler. And I disagreed, but was like, okay, I'm only going to push you so far. So it's a learning experience to really see how hard we can work to try to get some of these terms understandable and these principles understandable while still sticking to what the science is and not being trivial about the science.
Yeah. Yeah. And Joyce, from your standpoint and partnering with Nate and marketing, what are some lessons that you've learned and maybe challenges you've had to overcome?
So there's a lot I have learned. Okay, first of all, they're a completely different planet, right? So I got to kind of figure out, when do they start working on their projects? How early should we be doing it so that we're in sync? And so that has been a learning curve. So now I know to approach Nate not at the beginning of the year for the forum in April, but in the fall to say, hey, now that we're done with the summer workshops, let's start planning 10 months down the road. So that sort of a thing, to be in sync and to understand more of how UCM, University Communications and Marketing operates. That has been great. It's I can only think of, what I have learned. I don't know if I can even address challenges. One of the things that was super fun to do with Nate last summer, it's almost that time, Nate. Last summer, we actually presented at the National Conference of the Council on Undergraduate Research this work that we have done over the year or so on communicating research across the disciplines and how we started, how we did it, what we learned, how, and our advice for other folks. And it was super fun. We conducted a workshop there. So those two things stand out. And of course, the undergraduate research forum that we've talked about that has happened on campus. So, challenges, let's see. Nate kind of alluded to being mindful of the discipline. I mean, he alluded to the science of it, but, being a scientist, I'm aware, always constantly, painfully aware of the fact that I need to not trivialize the non-science disciplines, right? Because there is a discipline, there are approaches, methods, conventions that you need to be aware of, but you need to also kind of communicate to those folks, to those students and their mentors about the need for kind of lowering the barriers to access of their ideas, what they're finding out, and to be able to share those with the broader public without diluting the message. I think those are challenging because, I am a nerd. I appreciate the nerdiness, But I've also over the years been aware of how I need to break down that. And it is a challenge for me on an everyday basis to be able to do it for my own discipline, but then even more so to be constantly being aware of it, recognizing it, and helping those not in my discipline to kind of get there.
I love that. That's great. And I thank you both so much for this conversation and the work that you're doing. And the thing that sticks out to me is the really concerted effort that you're making to not only, this is a differentiator for the university and make it such, but also you're teaching students through some of the forums and the workshops real life skills to communicate their work and really amplify sort of the work that they're doing and the impact that they can have. And that's something I really appreciate. So thanks both for that and for joining me. And if you want to learn more, there will be some links in the show notes, including a link to a really great article in Inside Higher Ed on this work at Miami University. And that really kind of, for me, summed up a lot of what we talked about here and highlighted some of the great things happening. So check that out and check out Nate and Joyce. You can find them on social in the show notes as well. Thank you both so much for being with me. Breaking Silos is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry best as your hosts. Learn from Dave Cabilds, Jenny Lee Fowler, Eddie Francis, and many more of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451. The next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.